It didn't piss off the cool guys and it didn't piss off the Hesh guys. It was just sort of like retro Americana, like original vibe, you know? And anyone that skated could be like, oh, I get that, that's cool. It was the perfect thing for the perfect time, stereo. Or not to. They should all be in bags. Oh, this is one of my favorites. Here. This is an old Ethan Fowler. Whoa, it's sealed, like a baseball card. The creative process, it manifests itself in whatever. Sometimes I go like weeks without touching a pen and drawing something. You don't necessarily have to like draw to be creative. You can apply creativity to how you decorate your house, how you run your business. I was only 19 when we started Stereo. And when I look at like skaters that are like 28 and they're still sleeping till like 3 in the afternoon, you know, and I'm just like, dude, I had so much on my shoulders by like 20. I can't even imagine what it would be like, you know. I met Jason because me and Mike V took a trip out to California when I was 14, 15 years old, and we came out and stayed with Mark Gonzalez. So I got super lucky, and I met Jason our first trip out, or my first trip out. We didn't really talk much, but then a year later, I went to Savannah Slamma, and I was just like, hey, Jason, remember me? I'm the kid from New Jersey that was with Mike V. We were both kind of had similar like music tastes and interests. We weren't like drinking beer, we were drinking wine, you know? I think like Stereo kind of was a manifestation of our sort of aesthetic. When we both got sort of, I guess, disillusioned with things, it was just like a no-brainer, you know? Like, why don't we start our own deal? Our concept wasn't fully developed. It was just like, oh yeah, we want like a retro skate brand, you know? I kept going back to records for like ideas for graphics. Simultaneously, like a friend of mine had the first Blue Note book, and I stumbled on it and was like, oh, dude. My dad was a jazz musician, so I've been like surrounded with jazz my whole life, and just all these things started clicking in my head, you know, like why am I trying to like get inspired by these records? That is the art. You know, we did a little research, and most of them were like really old. The copyrights had expired or whatever, and this whole vibe is what we're trying to say here. Cut out the middleman, it's in Stereo. I've heard the argument, well, that's not art if you're ripping it off. Like, you know, if you have a jazz album cover from the 50s on a skateboard, it's like, it's not art, it's just ripping it off. But to me, it is art because it wasn't made to be on a skateboard. Like a logo or a concept that was for an album in 1962 for a bunch of people in the village listening to jazz music that is now getting purchased by a 12-year-old kid on a skateboard. It is art. It has become art because you're reappropriating it for an entirely different audience. You know, even when we first came out with Stereo, people would say like, oh, I could have done that. Like, that's just a bunch of logos and album cover stuff. It's like, yeah, but you probably would have picked out whack album covers to copy. Started watching a bunch of old jazz documentaries. A lot of them were like shot black and white. A lot of them were shot like with Super 8 or 16 mostly. And a couple of them had incorporated still photography. And I was just like, whoa, that's rad, you know? I just kind of wanted to bring like the culture I was finding outside of skateboarding, I wanted to bring into skateboarding. You know, and at the time it was really original because people were like, why the hell would you like use a weird Super 8 camera? Why would you do that, you know? Some people hated Stereo, you know? That cruisy, there's no hard tricks in it. I hate the art. It's gay, I hate the colors, I hate the skaters, the Super 8 intros and stuff, you know, with like the guys are just like, what the f is that? Someone on the sand? What is that? Like you know, there was people that like wanted to see the stereo video, the first stereo video, like without all the artsy stuff, you know what I mean? And I understand that some people don't have that patience. It's totally, you can't force it, you know? Because we were a success of the times, we were also on the flip side a victim of the times. People wanted guns and cartoons on skateboards. They didn't want a fucking sketchy drawing that looked like a jazz album cover.
Those are pretty cool though.
Yeah, and here's one of the blasphemous cartoon boards. This one's pretty dope though.
I know, they aren't bad.
Nah, see we tried to make them like retro at least. And this one's pretty sick. I remember like having a conversation with a prominent distributor that was just like, I pick up the phone, he's like, I hate to tell you this, man, but the whole jazz thing, it's just dead. People just aren't feeling it. And I was just like, okay. Like, Stereo's whole aesthetic fit where it was in skateboarding in 1994. It didn't really fit where skateboarding was in 1999. You know, there was no ill will, you know, really. It just sort of dissolved, and we were hanging on by a thread, and they wanted to appropriate that money to help launch these other things. It was like a huge relief when Stereo ended, just because it was like the first time I got to not be the skater dude that I knew, put that down for a minute and just sort of like join the rest of the world for a minute and not feel pressured to go skate. And but I got sick of it real quick. Yeah, I got sick of it real quick and then was like, how do I get back in the industry? I knew I wanted to bring it back, so I started trying to figure out how. And while I'd started all the like initial paperwork to get Stereo going under my name, I got a random email from Jason that he'd been skating Steve Barra's new park and had like 360 flips and backside flips and all that shit. And I was like, we would email back and forth, and I could tell he was like really excited about skateboarding. And I was just drove down to LA. Yeah, I mean, it was just a no-brainer. Like, I think Jason might have even brought it up, and I was like, funny you should ask. I've been working on the trademark rights for a year now, you know? Once we got the chance to breathe and hand some of the production and sales off again, it opened up the door to for me to like enjoy myself again and like not stress and help brainstorm on how to make Stereo successful, which is really what I'm passionate about. Yeah, I'm not passionate about running a business at all. So all of a sudden Stereo's like focused again and projecting forward, and it's doing better than it's done since like arguably ever right now. I'm learning a lot of things about Stereo like again, and it's like we're having to reinvent it for kids, and we've had to do that since the last like couple years, you know, because kids don't know the history anymore. We've had to like reintroduce the modern day audience to Stereo all over again. We're still doing it. And it's humbling, you know, because you think like everyone gets me. I'm this weird art guy, and I used to live in San Francisco. They know that. I'm an artist. They know that. No, they don't. You know? Yeah, nor do they care most of the time. I mean, I'd like to think that like Stereo in its artsiest phase definitely only appealed to the artsiest kid, you know? But I think when we're doing things right, it appeals to everybody, you know, because it's like a very Americana vibe, and it's very bold, and it's simple, and it's like tasteful. And I think like the art of Stereo and the graphics, like when it's done right, like it appeals to everyone, you know.
You know, when I was younger, skateboarding and music were so intertwined. Punk rock music and skateboarders were kind of one and the same kid, at least in Southern California. That's when I found my own independence and individuality. You know, I found like this is my tribe of people.